Good morning and welcome once again to another edition of Pray on This. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. As always, I'm your host, John Prey, and I'm really hoping to get some more support so that I can get around the Bill C-11 algorithm, which is going to regulate Canadian content. That lovely bit of censorship that has been brought to you by our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. But I'm not going to talk about Justin really today. I'm going to talk about his Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault. Canada's radical Environment Minister and Climate Change Minister is really out of control. Whether it be from his consistent lies about the carbon tax rebate, where he claims that 80% of people will get back more money than they pay, even though the parliamentary budget chief says, no, you're wrong, and 60% will pay more, to his overstepping his bounds and poking his nose into the business of the provinces, right down to telling you and I that we have to use our hands when we grab a meal on the go, as he's banned single-use plastics. You don't get a fork. No, you're not worthy of that. The end of the reign of terror of this convicted criminal cannot come soon enough. Now, I could go on for days about this man's opposition to our energy sector in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland. However, I'm going to talk about what this little eco-terrorist turned politician is up to in my home province of Ontario. 2 days ago, Caroline Mulroney, the Transportation Minister of the Government of Ontario, said that the Federal Environment Minister Guilbeault will do everything in his power to shut down construction of Highway 413. Now, Guilbeault denied everything yesterday, even the denial that he has said Ontario has no plan to fight climate change, which he absolutely did say. However, his denials ring hollow, and his hypocrisy was exposed when his aide, Oliver Anderson, said to reporters that the Ontario government has yet to file to the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada so that they can begin the planning of starting the environmental impact assessment for this project. This project falls into provincial jurisdiction under the Constitution of Canada, and our federal government, according to Jonathan Wilkinson, the former Environment Minister, now Natural Resources Minister, said his ministry had no rights under our Constitution to review 413 in 2021. The same for the Brantford bypass. Guilbeault himself said in February of 22 he could not review it. However, now he's moved the goalposts. He's using Bill C-69 to do it. This bill, called the Anti-Pipeline Bill when it became law in 2019 by then Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, at the time, we were all focused on what it could do to the oil and gas industry. Yet now we see the true purpose of Trudeau and his friend Guilbeault. It's to overrule any project from coast to coast to coast and use environmental law to do it and to overstep their bounds of the Constitution. The Canadian Constitution clearly shows the federal government is doing an environmental assessment into whether a province can build a highway is clearly outside of their constitutional rights. The same as resource development, as the federal minister in question wants to do a full environmental assessment on the development of the Ring of Fire in northern Ontario. Even though this is where all the minerals that are going to fund the new green, that are going to move forward the new green economy are, he still wants to review it. By creating and using C-69, the Trudeau Liberals have given an environmental activist, because that's what Guilbeault really is, the right to ignore the Constitution and to stop any development he doesn't like. The bill was recently challenged, and the Alberta Court of Appeal struck it down, saying in their ruling, it was not just a violation of the Constitution, but it effectively takes a wrecking ball to it. The federal government has appealed the decision to the Supreme Court of Canada, which means they still get to use the law while it's under appeal. The highest court most likely will confirm the Alberta court's ruling. However, while it's under appeal, this eco-terrorist Guilbeault will do anything possible to stop everything he doesn't like. If the federal government is allowed to get away with this by the Supreme Court of Canada and overstep its bounds within the division of powers, then it could, in theory, step in and stop even the building of a simple family home or a family farm being run until they do a full environmental assessment. This should come as no surprise to anyone in Canada after 8 years of Justin Trudeau's government. The ability of this government, its prime minister, and its ministers to impede the rights of its citizens, the provinces of Confederation, and the municipalities is well documented. In 8 years, this government has had 8 ethics code violations. That's 8 violations of the law. The Canadian Constitutional Law Foundation has never in its history launched as many court challenges to government overreach as it has on the Trudeau Liberals, also on provinces and municipal governments that follow Justin Trudeau's doctrine. There are 2, British Columbia and Newfoundland, and several of our more woke liberal cities like Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver. This is complete overreach by a minister that is totally against any development of any form. In his career, Stephen Guilbeault was known in his very hardcore activist days as the Green Jesus of Montreal. In 2001, he scaled the CN Tower in Toronto to plant a Greenpeace banner that read, "Canada and Bush, Climate Killers." The Bush is in reference to former President of the United States, George W. Bush. This stunt cost the CN Tower Corporation $50,000. Upon his conviction, he was placed on probation for 1 year. He had to repay the losses to the CN Tower Corporation. Then in 2002, he was part of a group that installed solar panels on the roof of then Alberta Premier Ralph Klein's home while his wife was at home. I know that this is downplayed by the media, such as the Trudeau Liberal propaganda machine, the Canadian Broadcast Corporation. However, Ralph Klein's wife, Colleen, was at home at the time. She said that she was terrorized by the protesters, of which Stephen Guilbeault was the senior member of the group. Premier Klein's widow, Colleen, still suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder coming from the incident and the actions of Guilbeault and his followers to this day. The Green Jesus of Montreal should be thankful the sentence that Jesus of Nazareth received went out of fashion 2,000 years ago. Guilbeault is not just an activist. He is in a position that a convicted criminal for acts of environmental protest that cross the line, whether progressives of the room like it or not. He's a terrorist who terrorized an innocent woman in her family home. The families of politicians should always be outside the scope of protests directed towards the actions of the politician family members that they live with. I have always said this. Protesters at the current Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford's home, crossed the line by going to his house. If you want to protest Premier Ford, he has an office in his riding. He has an office at Queen's Park. Want to protest? Go there. I would demand the harshest penalties allowed by law if protesters showed up at Guilbeault's home in Montreal and terrorized his wife, Renee Ann Blaise, or at the home of Justin Trudeau and caused emotional stress to Sophie or his children. A person like Stephen Guilbeault should never have been made a minister of the Crown. His appointment is comparable to appointing an anarchist who wants no criminal laws as the justice minister, or a person whose moral code is so stringent and tight that they're against alcohol, cannabis, and gambling of any form as head of the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario. Yes, it's Guilbeault's job to protect the environment, but it's not to do so with a religious fundamentalism like fervor that brings all development he does not agree with to a screeching halt for his own personal reasons or to hurt every political opponent that's deemed an enemy by himself or his boss, Justin Trudeau. Everyone who is against Highway 413, the expansion of the Ontario Green Belt in terms of development, or is against resource development in Northern Ontario, I want you all to remember one huge thing. You had your chance to stop everything you do not like that's going to be developed. It was on June 2nd, 2022. It was called the Ontario General Election. Your three parties that you could have all elected, the NDP, the Liberals, and the Greens, were all committed to stopping Doug Ford's plans. They lost popular support in that election, down a combined 4.21% of the popular vote. They also lost seats to Ford, 6 in total. You don't get to do an end run around Ford, who has every right under the Constitution to go ahead with these projects. And you don't even start on low voter turnout with me. Don't like it? Well, make sure the parties you support have solid platforms, inspiring leaders, and make sure you get out and vote next time. You sound like a child who didn't follow the rules, and now you're throwing a temper fit because you don't like the results. This is further proof that Justin Trudeau is an authoritarian who believes that the rules, the law, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the Constitution of Canada only applies when he thinks they should, and they do not exist when they go against what he wants to do. I have never in my life witnessed a Canadian Prime Minister or Premier with such arrogance, self-importance, and with no respect for the laws, which are the very foundation of this country, in the way that Justin Trudeau does. And it's not just him. It's also his liberal cult of ministers, MPs, and supporters. It is a federal creep of power and an overreach that the Canadian courts have already slapped his and his ministers' hands for already, and they're going to do it again. Activists who are tied to ideology should never hold high office. A man like Justin Trudeau, who is a cockwomble himself, will surround himself with more cockwombles. People like Guilbeault, Mendocino, Lametti, LeBlanc, Freeland, Anand, and I could go on. The unfortunate thing is this: it takes time to reveal their true goals and the absolute horrible results of enacting those goals. After 8 years, we have seen the results. A carbon tax that is creating climate poverty, with the added insult of every economist, including the PBO, saying the rebate that goes with this tax doesn't even come close to returning the amount of money that people pay for it. Well, the politicians lie and say it does. This government cannot run an economy, a justice system. Their foreign policy is an international joke, and their policy on the environment is an eco-activist terrorist paradise. The sooner it ends, the better Canada will be. It may take a decade or more to repair the damage to Canada that Trudeau and his disciples have caused. However, as both my papas used to say to me, you never get out of a hole unless you stop digging it deeper. It's time to put the shovel down. That, as always, is Pray on This. I wish you all a very happy Easter weekend, and I will see you all again soon.